Why the new direction the NCAA is heading in is actually great for Wisconsin, plus a great guest coming on to talk about the impact of Max Steinecker and this recruiting class on Wisconsin. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. Thank you for making this a part of your day, making it your first listen, being an everydayer. I'm your host, Ryan Harings. Appreciate you being here. Today's episode brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Today's episode, we are talking about the direction the NCAA is going with the new committee ruling, the NIL workings, how it's impactful for Wisconsin and why it's a good thing for the Badgers, plus the impact of Max Steinecker and some interesting ideas for football intros. Let's get the man Curtis in. Curtis Holland, the playmaker on the Discord. I mentioned this before the show, man. I know people listen to the show all the time. A lot of them are familiar with who you are and your backstory, or you're on the Discord, but not everybody catches every show. Give us the 30-second version again of who you are and your connection to the university.
Yeah, so I'm third-generation Badger. My grandpa, Lou Holland, played for the 63 Rose Bowl team and was a tremendous athlete there. My dad played football as well as my uncle. I've been a lifelong Badger fan. My mom's side, she's from Madison as well, so tons of ties to Madison. And when I graduated from Wisconsin back in 2015, I was the president of the lacrosse club there while I was in school. And just been a diehard Badger fan for a really long time and excited for the opportunity to be on this show.
Man, I always love having Curtis on because Curtis has a different perspective on a lot of these things. He's grown up in that family. He has a really unique viewpoint of it. And you and I have talked a lot about this over the last year, where college football is going. This, where's NIL going to be? How are schools going to pay players? One of the things you've been really consistent on, and you were ahead of this, is, hey, the direction this is going is going to be positive for the Badgers. And now that we've officially, I think, gotten past that first hurdle, why is this a good thing for Wisconsin?
Yeah, and I want to clarify too. It's positive in the way that we're keeping pace with the rest of the schools, and so obviously the deal went forth. Now students are able to be directly paid by the university through revenue sharing agreements. This is by no means the final say on this. There's going to be more legislation coming down. There's probably going to be some more lawsuits regarding how NIL can or can't be regulated, how much money players may or may not be able to be paid, what fair market value is. There'll be some more discussions to be had over the next several years. But this is something that the university's actually been preparing for at least a year. I've known about it. And it's the thing that is good for Wisconsin is that Wisconsin's athletic department is actually pretty much an independent business in the sense that it funds itself. And it's not every school does that. This is something that, Wisconsin does a tremendous job in how it manages its resources and money. For those who don't know, Chris McIntosh was actually heavily involved in making this happen. He was in multiple meetings on Capitol Hill talking with lawmakers, discussing, why revenue sharing would be a good thing for the players and for the student athletes as things go. And there's a couple of videos you can find online from, I think, back in maybe March, where he's, speaking directly to a Senate Judiciary Committee. So Wisconsin's been kind of at the forefront of this, maybe a little bit behind the scenes. I don't know how much I'm supposed to be known by that, but they've been at the forefront of this for some time. And we already have, our money for the football team earmarked and ready to go, so that the agreements that our players signed are already able to be capitalized on.
And let's hit a little bit more on the advantage of that. So I think this is where you and I are more in the weeds on this. I mean, we talk about this all the time in the Discord and we go back and forth. A lot of schools don't have that money earmarked. And now they're going to have to scramble is probably the wrong word, because this shouldn't have caught anybody by surprise. But now they're going to have to add a line item in there for $20 million into the athletic budget that they may already be underwater. There's a lot of major programs that are operating quite heavily in the red. And now they're going to have to come up with that money. Whereas Wisconsin, as you mentioned, kind of operating independently in the black, being one of the strongest financial universities in the country, is already kind of in place to do this. This sets up really nicely for them. And I think that's really the crux of the issue for other schools who are now going to have to find that money.
Yeah, absolutely. You think of a school like a UCLA, right now, their athletic department's in debt big time. And, they have to make that money back. Now, I don't quite understand exactly how California state laws work, from a business perspective. I think it is debt that they can leverage. So, I don't think a team like a UCLA is going to go without playing its athletes, but those are real financial concerns. Those things matter. And I think, one of the things that I think will come of this is that Wisconsin, the athletic department, which is separate from the collective, has a great relationship with a lot of its donors. This relationship goes back, 50, 100 years. I mean, this has been a working thing that's been going on, since I've been alive and before that. And so because of that, it's very, I don't want to say it's easy. That's not a fair thing to say, but it is something where they can go back to their donorship relationships and say, hey, look, we want to fund, I think it's 15, 16 million, whatever goes to football, in order to pay our athletes, and they can raise that money. Whereas from a collective perspective for Wisconsin, that's a new relationship. These are people who are independent of the university. They have passion. They want to see Wisconsin do well, but they don't have those same relationships. And so it's been a little bit of a challenge to build those over the last few years. And, the people who donate money to the university, they have different priorities. Some of them give to academics. Some of them are focused on their own businesses. Some of them are focused on helping their families and things like that. So it's not always just hey, we're willing to give money to our school because we went there. It's why should I value giving money to the school, especially when a lot of them went to school at Wisconsin when Wisconsin was not a name in football, right? It was never a priority for them. And so that's been kind of the challenge. Now, the good thing for us is that, we do have the money internally and we can raise that. And to some degree, the money that we had from NIL is separate. Other schools might be in a little bit of a different situation because they may have been more willing to give the football out the gate, right? Well, now that some of that money that maybe was going to go to players through NIL will be rerouted back through the university to go through rev share. Well, now you're taking money away from what they had for NIL to go to rev share. Now, this might not be for some of the bigger schools, your Ohio States, Oregons. They probably can work through this no problem and maintain the amount of investment that they've had. But for the most part, this is a real tangible problem for most of the schools in FBS. And so what this does for Wisconsin is, one, tangibly, we actually double, triple our money we're giving the players just out the gate. So that's a positive. But it keeps us in line of that top 20, top 25 spending schools. And so, while we might not really be at the rate of spending like an Oregon or an Ohio State, we'll still be spending better than or amongst the ranks of Michigan State, Iowa, Minnesota's. We'll stay at that or higher levels. The Indianas, these teams. We'll be able to maintain that level. And that should be enough to continue to keep us in that top 25 recruiting range or, team talent range for the foreseeable future.
Well, let's be honest, and I've said this a lot. The more things change, the more they stay the same. We were never going to spend at the Ohio State level, the Oregon, the new version of Oregon level. USC spending a ton. I mean, that was never going to happen, right? It was more, can we keep pace with where we've been? And I think this does that, and probably even a little bit more. You hit on something I thought was really a really good point, where because the counter argument to this is, well, fine, there's going to be revenue sharing. Schools are going to get 20 million. The big schools are just going to go to their NIL base and say, now we need another 20 million. And that's still where that gap is going to lie. But if that NIL base now has to start giving money to the university to cover that shortfall, I think you nailed it. It takes away from their ability to double up there. I think that is a really interesting point. And their players are still going to get paid more. There's still going to be some schools that leverage NIL to a much higher degree. But even that is more legislated. Even that is trickier. And I think that's the other thing we talked about before the show. The free-for-all is gone. Now there's real things that you have to work through and jump through and make it a legitimate business offer. And that's not as easy in practice as it is in theory.
No. And I think most people have recognized that this isn't going to eliminate like the concept of bagmen, right? I don't even think NIL really eliminated the concept of bagmen. But what you're going to see now is that the way these NIL deals are structured, at least on paper, is they have to go through a legitimate business. And then anything over $600 in a donation will be evaluated by an independent third party. I believe, and I'm not sure on this, so don't quote me on this, but I believe, having government ties. And so the barrier to spending money in a sideways fashion is much different than when we just had the NCAA, because now you have actual governmental committees. This is more like the SEC in business. If you violate laws, you're talking about actual legal ramifications, not just, my team loses scholarships for the year, right? And so that's just a little bit higher barrier. On top of that, you have to think about this realistically. It's easy to look on paper and say, well, yeah, the SEC is still going to just give 20 million through their businesses. That's fine. A business can give $1 million. Well, let's think about that. Let's say you own a car dealership. Do you really have the free capital in your car dealership to just give $1 million to a quarterback and then not get a return on that? And let's say you give that $1 million to Carson Beck, and Carson Beck doesn't have a good season, right? And he transfers at the end of the year. And now your business is out $1 million. $1 million that could go back into your business to help it sustain and grow and pay your employees, right? So the incentive structure is way different now from a donation perspective. So yeah, we could look at an Oregon and say, well, yeah, Phil Knight doesn't care. He's just going to give money through Nike. Well, that's fine up until the point that, he passes away from old age. And now you're talking about, all right, well, are we really giving $40 million to our team? Is that really helping our bottom line at all? Is that really where we should best spend our resources? And that's how this is going to start to play out down the road.
And then Nike steps in and says, yeah, we're done with that. I'll tell you, that's why if I ever owned a car business, by the way, I would go bankrupt. All of my money would be going towards quarterbacks, cornerbacks, and offensive tackles. My business would be bankrupt in a year because, there's no – you're right. Like that fluidity isn't there for a lot of businesses. All right, we got to take a quick break here. We're going to come back and talk about Max Steinecker, this recruiting class, and maybe a deeper impact on this class than we had anticipated and why going forward that might not be such a big deal. We're going to talk about that next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show. As always, a quick second to say thank you for tuning in. Today's episode from the cabin brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the incredible place where you can go to games together. Let's do more stuff in life. Like I talk about this all the time. That part isn't on the script because I just think, I get bogged down sometimes in my day-to-day and my work and the kids and all the things you need to do. Maybe I don't do as much of the things as I want to do. And Game Time is a great spot for you to get the tickets to do more in life. Go to Camp Randall, go to the Kohl Center, or just go to a concert, theater, whatever it is. Let's do more stuff in life. Let's do more things in life. Game Time can help you get there. It is an incredible ticket platform, huge inventory, flash deals. The tickets actually get cheaper the closer you get to the event, so you don't have to plan months in advance. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKDOWNCollege for $20 off your purchase. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, let's come back into this. Big part. So we've been talking a lot of 2026 recruiting. Obviously, official visits are going on. Max Steinecker, who was an instrumental part of the recruiting machine that Luke Fickell built along with Pat Lambert and a couple other guys that are big parts of this as well. Obviously, he left USC earlier in this year. You think, Curtis, we're still feeling the after effects of Steinecker leaving?
Yeah, I think that's a major part of it. I think when I think about the impact that Max had, what was his major impact? What was his, what was the reason why he's a successful recruiter, right? And every player you talk to is the relationships that he built with them, right? And they were real relationships. The players loved him. The recruits loved him. He knew everybody on the team. He knew all the recruits that we were talking to, and he had developed relationships. Well, what happens when he leaves mid-cycle? All that relationship equity that he has leaves with him. And so now you have people trying to scramble, come back, and maintain or rebuild these relationships. Now, Pat is a guy I think can do that. However, he's focusing on the players that he's primarily focusing on, or the job that he's primarily focusing on. The new guy we brought in, I think he could be a tremendous recruiter as well. But now he's coming from not knowing any of the players, not knowing any of the recruits, not really knowing anything about Wisconsin, and having to rebuild those relationships in 1 to 2 months. It's not really doable. Usually one of, if not the biggest factor in gaining a recruit is the relationships they have with the staff, the players, what have you. And if that component, which is so vitally important and Max was so vitally good at, if that's no longer there, then, you're going to see some fall off in our recruiting. And that's what I think you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. When he left, the point I made is I think long-term they're going to be fine because I trust Luke Fickell to put the right people in the recruiting department. I think Pat Lambert is still tremendous. But short-term, I think you're going to feel the impact of Max because he is a tremendously valuable person at building relationships. He's great at it. Like he is really, really good at it. When he left, I remember somebody saying, well, just go find another young person that has energy. I'm like, it's not that simple. Like not everybody can build relationships. Not everybody is a grinder. Like the dude put in hours. He built relationships and players loved him. And that's a huge part of getting people.
Exactly. And the funny thing is, I worked in corporate recruiting for, several years. And it's not easy to find people who are good at building relationships. Like it's just not. And that's a rare talent. There's a reason why he's at USC and why USC is going to have the #1 class in the country this year. That's not a mistake, And so I think what people just need to understand, at least for the short term, to your point, is that, we're sort of working on half a deck of cards because a key relationship piece is no longer there. Now, some people might say, well, that's a problem. If you're relying on one person to do that role and then he leaves, and then you're not getting recruits. Well, that shows systemic problems at Wisconsin, right? Well, think about it like this. If we were to fire Fickell tomorrow, how many players would stick around? It's all about the relationship component. And so, I think that, again, us losing Max, especially when we lost him, just from a pure momentum of recruiting perspective, that's why we're seeing maybe not as many people quick to jump in and commit as well as they did, the last 2 years under this staff.
Yeah, and you also saw a couple players the Badgers were in on. I forget the defensive tackle's name, but he ended up at USC. And it's not just because of Max. Listen, USC has also a lot to sell. They have built an entire recruiting department. They're doing very well.
The weather is much nicer there.
The weather's there. they are not. I'm trying to think of the right way to phrase this. They're doing just fine from the NIL standpoint. I'll just phrase it like that. But Max is tremendous. Like, I even having talked to him a little bit myself, he was a loss. And yeah, I think there are definitely elements of this that impact this class. I put a question up in the Discord, man. I was curious on this. Is it a bigger deal in this recruiting cycle? What is the biggest impact for a bit of the slow start? And this class still has a long ways to go, and they've got some really nice pieces in there. Do you think it's Max leaving, or do you think it's an underwhelming on-field performance the last couple of years? What is the, if you had to percentage those, just those two?
So I know a lot of former athletes, and obviously I'm related to former athletes, and I think it varies per person. But if I had to put a finger on it, I do believe it's the fact that we lost Max, and we lost the key linchpin in many of our recruiting relationships in losing him. And that's what I think probably is why our class maybe isn't at the volume that we've seen in the previous classes. I don't know if I thought this class was going to be maybe as high level or high talented as some of these previous classes that we've looked at, but I figured the volume would be the thing that we still hit on, and I still feel like it's we don't have as many people up until this point as we'd had in previous classes, and so I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Max left, and again, it's just a relationship game. I've seen the staff, obviously having canceled a number of visits. That's peculiar to me. I'm not sure I fully understand their rationale behind it. I do know that they have a rationale behind it, and maybe we're not necessarily privy to that, but I think I would say Max probably is the main thing. I actually wanted to touch, though, if you didn't mind, on what I think how record plays into this.
Oh, let's do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. So the way I see, a football record and success on the field, it's not as cut and dry as like, if you're good, you want to go play for the good school, right? I think it has more to do with exposure. So let's think of it like this. Who do the major media companies always talk about? Your Alabamas, your Clemsons, your Ohio States, your Texases, all these things. And they're big schools and they have a lot of pull, but you also have to understand they're the teams that are doing well.
Yeah,
Oklahoma struggled last year. I barely heard about Oklahoma, right? Wisconsin, we struggled. We barely got mentioned in the media. Indiana, on the other hand, they were everywhere. And so what does that do? Well, all that is marketing. It's free marketing for the school. And if you're doing well, it's positive free marketing for the school, right? And so what that does is it exposes your brand to more eyeballs across the country, exposes you to more high school players. There's more interaction online because you're being seen more. It's just a volume thing. And so what that does is, in my opinion, it opens the door for players who maybe hadn't thought about Wisconsin just because they never really saw them. And now they're seeing them, primetime football games. It's like, oh, this looks like a cool school. Maybe I'll check them out too. I know they got a good background. And then once you get on campus, now it's on the staff where it's selling your vision. It's building the relationships. It's showing them how they can develop for the NFL. And now increasingly too, there's an element of like, hey, like this is what we can offer you from a monetary perspective, right? But ultimately, I think that when it comes to record, I don't know if that's necessarily vitally important to getting good recruits.
No, you and I are in the exact same boat with this. I don't think the record matters as much as the things that come along with the record, exactly like you're saying. Because let's take it even a step further. Who's the target audience here? If you're a football staff, it's not us. It's not 41-year-old podcasting Ryan. It's 17-year-old high school kid. Kids are impulsive. That's what they are. They get drawn to, they're like flies to light. Sorry, it is what it is. I was impulsive once too. They get drawn to exciting things, bigger things, things that are talked about, things that are trending. And if you are 9-1 and you are hosting a kid, not only is your stadium jumping, not only is it excited, the people are more excited, the environment's better. Everything goes better when you win. You get more. I think you're going to get more NIL contributions. You're going to have a more excited home game. You're going to have better official visits. To your point, you have marketing. You're going to be trending on Twitter, right? On social media platforms that those kids live on. I think it all ties into winning. I think to me, it's kind of both. Going back to the original question, is it a bigger deal that, Max left or a bigger deal that we've struggled for a couple of years? I think it's kind of 50-50 for me in this class. I do think both of them tie in. But yeah, Max is a big loss. And I think going forward, you're going to see this bounce back because I believe that they backfilled it with quality people. And I believe in Pat Lambert and the job he does. But in this year, that was a tough hurdle to overcome, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, I think like you said, I think by the time, our new staff really gets sort of integrated in itself over the probably now and the next few months, I think going into 27, right? Going into the 27 classes, I think you're going to see us kind of return to that same level of consistency.
Yeah, I agree. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We have a fun topic coming up. I'm curious how we can maybe improve the beginning of football games, generate a little more excitement. Curtis has some ideas here. I have some as well. We're coming up next with that on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick second for our friends of the show. And as always, a quick second to say thank you for tuning into Locked On Badgers. Curtis, I want to hit you with this one. And this is something you brought up wanting to talk about today, which I think is great because I actually talked about this yesterday. So we had a question here from Mike, and he said, which Badger tradition should be modernized or even scrapped completely? And this isn't really a tradition, but my first thought was we got to do a better job of the beginning of the football game, of the football intro, of starting the game. It's just having been to Penn State, I've been to SEC games because I was stationed in Georgia. We just have no juice to start a game in our stadium. Am I crazy on that? Or I know you have thoughts here.
Yeah, I don't think you are. I mean, I'll say this. When I was a freshman in 2010 is when we beat Ohio State. And I can remember, being incredibly hyped for the intro. We played the U2 song and then everybody was coming out and, the whole stadium was buzzing. But there was a lot of external factors to that. It was a night game. We had game day. Game day had picked us to win. The Madison was crazy that weekend. Everything kind of lined up right so that impetus was there. But that boost in the beginning of the stadium, I mean, the stadium roar didn't stop until well after Gilreath had returned a touchdown. From the start of the intro video all the way through. Now that energy was palpable. It stayed the whole night, and it definitely mattered, right? And you could see Ohio State was rattled on the sidelines. And so, that's something that you want to create, right? And I think that today, the staff wants to fix that, improve that. But it's tough because you're trying to figure out how to do it and things like that. One of the things that I had been thinking about is that what's the draw to get state fans into the stadium early, right? And here's the thing. We're working on fixing the entrance to the student section, making it easier to get in. But I was a student. I know how the game is. Yeah, it's tough to get in. But if you show up, if you leave and you get there 10 minutes before kickoff, you'll be seated by the time the ball kicks off. Like, it's not that hard. I know both sides of the argument. And trust me, I've lived both sides of the argument. Like, students, yeah, I get it. But also, they're hanging out and doing their thing before they come to the game. That's just part of the being a student at Wisconsin. So the game becomes, all right, well, how can we incentivize people to get there? It's like, well, you have to build some type of tradition into the beginning of the game. It's like, well, what does that look like? Well, think about Virginia Tech. They have the opposite problem of us. Virginia Tech has their Enter the Sandman at the beginning of the game, right? They're jumping, they're hopping. It's the thing, game day gets on camera. They're showing the walk up with the players. And then when Virginia Tech's not good, guess what happens? After the first quarter, stadium empty. Everybody leaves. They just go home, right? We have jump around in the third quarter. Everybody shows up for the jump around, they stay jump around, and then they leave, right? If we were to manufacture something in the beginning of the game where everybody wants to go see that, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to stick around the jump around, well, now we just solved our stadium attendance problem because we've made an incentive outside of just the game. Because as much as I would love for that to be the main reason people are in the stadium, it clearly shows that it's not. And so if you're able to, take advantage of an entrance, now that we've added some LED lights, I'm curious to see how these fit into the scheme of the football stadium experience this year. We'll get to see when we play Miami on the Thursday night game. So I think you combine these things, you make it more of an event, you play engaging music that gets the people involved, gets them moving a little bit. That will be something that we can create more of an incentive, more of an exciting presence at a home game.
I hear all that. What could you do that's repeatable that would get 18 to 22-year-olds in earlier? Like, what does that actually look like?
Look, that's the $1 million question. If you can figure out how to sell to 18, 22-year-olds, you're gonna make $1 million. I think the thing for me is, like, this is where, and I'm willing to speak to the Locked On Badgers community here and say, hey, if you guys have thoughts, like, this is a great forum to bring those out, because I know a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this, and I think that's all valuable. I think it's a great way to sort of get this. My whole reason for bringing this up today is to get it out into the ether. Start think about these things, and how can we come up with some ideas that maybe get the athletic department excited about it and get the fans excited about it. Me personally, the way I sort of have envisioned this is you have prior to sort of the intro video, you have maybe a moment where you have some, rhythmic style beat, like just like, let's say, the drum line for oh my gosh, I can't think the Queen song. We Will Rock You, just the drum line. It gets people kind of engaged. And then you have a song that sort of builds up in momentum, but also is a natural movement. It creates natural movement amongst the fans. So, for example, this is just one example that I thought about, but like a song like Swag Surf, right? Anytime you play that song in any event, people are going to start swaying, right?
Yeah.
And it's natural. It's just something that you're going to do because it's an awesome song and it's fun to do. And that creates that type of environment. And if it becomes an organic thing, I mean, think about how all the stadium traditions start. Jump Around was an organic start. They just played Jump Around one time and everybody liked it. And then they just kept doing it. And then it became this big thing. Mr. Brightside at Michigan. You think Michigan's the first school to play Mr. Brightside at a football game? Like, no. But then it became the thing that people would come and see, right? The Wave at Iowa. The Enter Sandman at Virginia Tech. All these things were things that were done, and then they became what they are, right? And so that's kind of how I see it.
I love everything about this. I just don't know what that $1 million idea is. Because you mentioned
well,
it. Well,
that's the thing. Like I don't know either. I'm just giving my thoughts here. I'm more than willing to hear everybody's thoughts.
I love it. I love it because I am always underwhelmed. And I'm the biggest, along with you and other people in this community, the biggest Badger fan there is out there. I self-hype for Badger games. I don't need extra juice. Like my fuel is already filled up when I'm in Camp Randall. But I'm still always underwhelmed by the intro. And I get it from an 18, 19-year-old. I'm not getting there early to see that. Like I'll drink some more beer in the parking lot. So you mentioned Jump Around. Jump Around was incredibly organic. It wasn't planned. And how do you plan something that has an organic feel? That's the tricky part, right? Because kids are counterculture in general. They're not going to want to participate in something that's planned to get them there early. Right? It has to be something that has some type of juice from their experience. And I don't know what that is for an 18, 19, 21-year-old. I just don't. I don't know if you can find that. I don't know if that answer is there.
Well, I'll say this. I think you can, but I think it has to at times too. This is where we go back to the success in football, right? I think it's anchored to stuff. Like, for example, I liked our U2 intro for a long time, probably longer than most people, because when we went to that Ohio State game I told you about, that was the memory I had. The stadium went crazy during the intro video. Next thing you know, Gilreath returns a touchdown. Right. And that just was like, yes, this is what it is. This is awesome. To the point where I started bringing my friends from other Big Ten schools and they're like, yeah, man, this is kind of mellow. And I'm like, oh, well, so it's one of those things. Right. And but I think how you do it, again, is you experiment, you try. But I think what's important when it comes to getting people excited is you got to get the body involved. You got to get people jumping, swaying, clapping, something, right? Something that gets them moving, something that gets them out of the many conversations you have along the stadium, gets them focused on the moment, focused on the game. And I think once you kind of get to that point, whatever that is, however that's structured, that's when you start to repeat it. It becomes a repeatable thing. And if you start to do well, people start to like it, that's when it starts to become a thing. And I'll be honest, there is a little bit of narrative that goes to that. There is, the ESPN media helps, Wisconsin marketing. This is how you market. You create this event that becomes something that people want to go see, right? And I've always felt that we do not take nearly enough advantage of the fact that Madison is one of the greatest cities and college campuses in the country, and that game day experience, the Wisconsin fan experience, is one of the greatest fan experiences in the country. We just take that for granted. Like, we all know that, but we sort of rest on our laurels there. And I think if we were to continue to embrace that and continue to build that, I think you see these types of things grow and become more popular.
Yeah, I love the point you make, and you hit around it a couple times, but you just got to try some things too. Like there is an element of, it feels like at times we've mailed that portion of the game in and it's gotten a little stale. You do have to try things, and if it doesn't work, you're not any further behind than where you were.
No,
people aren't there to see it anyway right now. So try something. And I think, listen, for night games, I think it's a lot easier. You could lead up with fireworks or pyro or drones. An 11 a.m. start, man, it's always going to be a bit of a tough sell unless it's a big
and I think of it like this too. Like, think of, for example, even Iowa. We went to the Iowa game last year at Iowa, and they have the swarm at the beginning, right? And it's the big thing. All the jumbotrons got yellow with black letters say swarm everywhere, and they're playing back in black. And the team walks out, and everybody's just locked in. Like, I remember my one friend saying, "Hey man, we got to get there for the swarm. We got to get there for the walk-in." And it's like, that's what we want to create. If we can create that environment in our fandom, then again, we solve our stadium entry problem.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. He is the great Curtis Holland joining us again. part of Badger royalty. Always great to get Curtis on because he has an incredibly unique and articulate opinion, as always, with the sport. Curtis, man, thank you as always. Go check him out on the Discord along with us. On Wisconsin, a bunch of guests coming up this week. We got Nick Ghostin coming up, another obviously big official visit weekend. Rajiv's going to be jumping on. We got Fenderson from the 26th, Latravian Fenderson from the 26th class, and his dad hopping on. His dad was a hooper, so that's going to be a fun show. We got one of his coaches as well jumping on to break down his game. So a bunch of stuff coming up as always. On Wisconsin, Curtis, as always, man, I appreciate you, and we will definitely talk later.